You will therefore take a Vietnamese driving test.
Well, that'll just be one of those joke ones. You know, the Egypt one?
Forwards and backwards, 6 feet.
Cheer up! This is going to be a doddle.
It wasn't. First, we had to take an oral theory test in Vietnamese.
Chuyển nhân dân, vậy giờ có nghĩa là phải thực hiện chuyển dân. Bây giờ mời người này. Please.
May. May. You, stand up, stand up, stand up.
Thấy người điều khiển giao thông tay giang ngang thì như thế nào? Người này. Không đúng, phải chưa? Hai tay giang ngang là không phải là dừng lại mà phía bên tay phải. Bây giờ mời tiếp.
Oh no. Yes.
Khi đi ở trên đường thì phải thực hiện chuyển dần hay là chuyển ngay?
Always give way to the car from the right.
You have a 1 in 100 chance of being right there, but you're in the wrong language.
Người lái xe mô tô phải được bao nhiêu tuổi?
Dot fait laisiki my time tui.
Dân.
What did you just do?
18. It's 18 years old.
How did you know?
Age you're allowed to ride your motorbike. It's 18.
But
It's my time.
how did you know watching us?
Did you not bother learning Vietnamese before you came here?
Well, no.
The spoon.
So, only one of us had shone in the classroom, but in the practical test, things would be better.
Listen, while we were filming that, it was amazing how it sort of brought back all that excitement of when we first learned to drive, when we were 17. Yeah. And, you know, the driving test and passing it. Well, not passing it in your case, because what was it you did? Yeah. What do you do in a driving test if you don't pass it?
Yes.
You...
All right,
you,
I failed.
All right,
I failed first time.
Failed.
Yes, I did.
Failure.
Yes, I failed.
Why did you fail?
Well, because a traffic light went red as I was coming up to it, and the examiner said, proceed as you normally would, so I gave it a bootful. Failed.
Presumably you passed first time?
No.
Really?
I failed.
No?
Yeah.
You failed? What, you got lost?
We were going along, and all of a sudden, he hit the dashboard with his clipboard, and he said, "Look out, there's a small child in the road." And I said, "No, there isn't," and kept going. Because there wasn't.
So you were just being pedantic?
No, I was being correct.
He was anticipating an emergency stop, not an argument, you fool.
Was he?
Yeah, that's what was going on. Actually...
What?
But while we're on the subject, at the other end of the scale from our failure, you turned up with a pair of scissors in your pocket, claiming it was ready to cut the L plates off your car.
No, it's true.
That's kind of optimistic.
I didn't see it as a driving test so much as a confirmation of my excellence.
Oh, God.
No, I mean, that's really what it was, because when he said, the man, whatever he was, the instructor, examiner, when he said, "Congratulations, Mr. Clarkson, you've passed," what I heard was, "Congratulations, Mr. Clarkson, you are the best driver I've ever seen in my life." And so you can imagine my surprise 36 hours later to find myself in a field surrounded by sheep that were no longer alive and bits of what used to be my mum's Audi. How did this happen? I'm the best driver in the world and I've gone and stuffed it.
How is she supposed to get out of that?
That?
No, it's impossible.
It's possible.
It isn't possible. That car is... The poles are only a foot longer than the car.
What in your country do you do that examination?
We don't do that.
We doesn't do it.
But it's not going to be possible.
It's possible here.
Is this it? Once you've done this, do you have a licence? It's like that scene in the Austin Powers movie where he does a million... and we all laugh, and they make you do it for your test.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. She's done it.
Yep. You know...
Well, do you realise the world's most angry man is going to have a go now?
Whoa.
Hammond!
Hammond!
What are you doing?
I'm going to give it a go.
He drives a Subaru.
I'm out!
Subaru!
I want my licence!
Subaru! There you go, 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 go! Subaru! Subaru! Subaru!
Before we were allowed to drive over there, we all had to sit Chinese driving tests. Now, We've seen driving tests around the world. I remember one in India I encountered once where a woman passed even though she was in the back of the car and her examiner was in another car following along behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it used to be in Egypt that you had to drive 6 feet forwards but then 6 feet backwards and then you'd pass.
And that was it.
I'd love to meet somebody who failed that.
Yeah. Anyhow, so we figured that to get a Chinese driving test, it would be, you know, quite an easy test. However, we were in for a bit of a surprise. Now, I actually got some footage of Hammond taking his test. Anyone want to see it? Yeah? It's poor quality, it's on my phone, but here we go. Test centre. Right, so he has to ball his fists. Then a squat. There he goes. He goes. And then he has to get on some weigh scales. Tense moment here, tense moment. Still tense.
Yeah. You passed. Hammond has passed.
Seriously?
Well done.
That was it.
It was nothing. I made it look easy.
That was... Well, it was the easiest driving test I've ever heard
I know,
of.
basically I passed because I proved that my hands do that and I'm affected by gravity. That's it.
I think it is actually just a test to check that you are a human being and not a dog, because they can't
That's all
do
it was. However, afterwards, we were taken into a sort of lecture theatre by a man who was taught us through the perils of the road in China, and he said that we had to look out for a number of things running out into the road in front of us, including, and I'm not... This is a quote, yes, you will back me up on this. This is what he said, including dogs, children and women.
That's what he said.
Yes, he said,
that.
be careful, they run out into the road.
Oh, you never know, they're unpredictable.
Yeah, I don't think the hashtag #MeToo movement has reached Chongqing just yet.
Mind you, you say that. There are 78 self-made billionaire women in the whole world, and 49 of them are Chinese.
Yeah. Well, there would be more, but some of them got run over.
The news. There was a man in the papers this week who has failed his driving theory test 92 times. 92?
I don't want to be rude, but he must be an idiot. I mean, really,
Well,
90...
Interestingly, you say that. Have you seen the theory test?
Well, I didn't have to do one.
No, is anyone here... Have you seen the theory test? Anybody? Yeah. You have? Because most people, I think, of our age haven't. And none of the questions have got anything to do, as far as I can work out, with driving. And can I give you some examples, right? You can answer this. An elderly person's ability could be affected because they may be unable to...
Eat toffees.
No.
Get an erection.
Wear jeans.
Tommy, where's the safest place to park your vehicle at night?
In a police station.
Right, I've got a picture here. I'm going to bring out this picture. Right. This is a real question, OK? You must not stop on these road markings because you may obstruct what?
Landing aircraft.
Yes, I mean, seriously, that is he's managed to fail 92 times on that one.
Those are not questions to pass your driving. Do any of them say, for instance, can you drive a car?
No. I'm in the book now. This is what you buy your teenage child when they're learning to drive. At an incident, a small child is not breathing. To restore normal breathing, you should breathe into their mouth. A, sharply. B, gently. C, heavily. D, tenderly.
It doesn't say tenderly.
Made tenderly up. No, that's enough driving test rubbish, so we'll have to move it on, otherwise we'll be here all day.
To ride in a figure of 8, and then you can go out and ride on Ho Chi Minh's highway.
Yes.
That's it.
So if you touch the white lines, you fail.
Presumably. Barbara Cartland went first.
R.Hammond.
Oh, it's me. In. It's quite tight.
It says him like riding an enormous motorcycle.
Oh, it's harder than it looks.
Is he doing well? Good?
R.Hammond. Pass.
You passed!
Passed.
You passed!
J.May.
He'll love this. It's all about precision and going slowly and being accurate.
Gone the wrong way.
Yeah, it's good spectator sport, though, isn't it?
It is. They're loving it. They're really loving it.
J.May. Pass. J.May. Class.
Yes.
Get on with it.
I've got the angle right. No, that's not right.
What he's doing is rather predictably going too fast.
This is just impossible on these wheels. They're too small.
J.May Clarkson, fail.
You failed.
I've only been riding a bike 5 days.
Happily, in Vietnam, if you fail, you are allowed to try again, immediately.
He's spent less time in the circle than he has out of the circle.
Oh!
J.May Clarkson, fail.
Now, there are proposals this week in the corridors of power that anyone who passes their driving test must be accompanied for the first few years on the road by an experienced, sober person who's over 25.
You can kind of see why they think that's a good idea, though, can't you? Because, you know...
That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. The stupidest. OK, I have spent 17 years ferrying my daughter about. Last month, she passed her driving tests, which means it's now her turn to ferry me about, specifically to and from the pub. OK? Now, what's the point if she gets to the pub and she can't run me home if I've had a drink? It doesn't work.
Actually, no, it's more complicated than that because she couldn't get to the pub to pick you up because she couldn't drive there on her own anyway, so it...
So she'd have to get an older boyfriend?
Yeah.
Well, that'd be... Hello, Dad, have you met Keith? He's 53. Why are you looking so excited?
He's brought his teenager with him.
Are you just her experienced driver? Because this is properly embarrassing for you if that's not what's happening.
Think of me as a kindly experienced driver, my dear.
In 1934, things were bad. 7,000 people were killed on the roads, even though there were only 1.5 million cars. In 1935, the driving test was introduced, and the death rate immediately fell by 1,000. Today, with 22 million cars on the roads, around about 5,000 are killed annually, but there's still room for improvement. Safer cars and better roads have helped, but there are now voices calling for improved driver training, especially as today's driving test is not exactly dissimilar to the test of 35. The only major changes coming next week involve the introduction of a reverse parking manoeuvre, hardly a giant leap forward for mankind. You still read a number plate at 20 metres and then drive for around about 20 minutes, hopefully showing the instructor you're not incompetent. And then you'll be asked questions on the highway code. Pass this lot and you're technically qualified, but are you competent? And even if you are, you can easily forget the basics. Do you know what the stopping distance is from 70 miles an hour on a dry road?
25 yards?
25, no, 90.
90?
Yeah, 315 feet.
Oh, 200 feet? I don't know.
Not quite 315.
400 feet.
Well, you're a nice, safe driver. Could you define the 3 lanes on a motorway? Do you know what they're all for?
For slow traffic on the left, it's an overtaking on the third one.
Outside lane is passing lane. The middle lane will be middle lane, and the inside lane, I don't know.
A report, soon to be published, shows that nearly 1/5 of newly qualified drivers have an accident in their first year. A significant number have 2 or more.
Well, there's 1 or 2 things that we're unhappy about. Eyesight testing, for instance. I believe that there should be a better test of eyesight. I'm concerned also that it isn't a particularly good test. It isn't necessarily a preparation for driving on our modern roads. I'm thinking of motorway driving and night driving, and very often a person that passes their test knows very little about the motor car itself, and perhaps there is a case for some theoretical tests to make sure that they have some idea about driving, they have some idea about the vehicle, they're at least capable of preparing it properly to drive on our roads.
If there was a much wider syllabus from which the test was taken, then people would have to learn all of it and could be tested on part of it. The current driving test doesn't really give the examiner enough time to assess whether a person is up to the required standard. The test needs to be longer and include more manoeuvres. The introduction of the reverse parking exercise from the 1st of April is a step forwards.
The problem is that the newly formed Driving Standards Agency is reasonably satisfied with the current state of play, and changes must come from them.
I don't think it is out of date. He has demonstrated on the driving test that he's able to drive safely and conscientiously. And it's generally the case, I think, that most people having passed the test are well able to cope with conditions which they're likely to meet, very often as well as any experienced driver. It would not be practical to be able to test on every variety of road and weather conditions, no matter how long the test lasted. You couldn't test on everything.
Other countries are constantly updating their tests. In Florida, candidates must answer 20 questions before they're even allowed to take a test. And no fumbling around reading number plates either. They have a far more sophisticated eye test and fail twice as many as we do because they can't see properly. Interestingly, they've already dropped the parking manoeuvre that we're about to introduce in favour of a far more elaborate test. I think he's failing. Norway is acknowledged to have one of the hardest tests. They have 50 questions to answer in examination conditions on driving, the highway code, and even how a car works. And this part is completely separate from the actual driving test. And there's no wallying about on a housing estate either. You must take 4 lessons at night and in bad weather before the test. And even if you pass it, you must do more training in all sorts of conditions over the following 2 years. There's even more theory testing. Maybe we should be doing the same.
Certainly we are looking at the theory element of the test, and we will be looking to improve and broaden what we ask in that test. The actual, whether it will be written or otherwise, is still open for debate, and we are actually, within the next 2 months, going out on a consultation exercise when we'll be asking all interested parties their views on how that should be taken forward.
They have a scheme in Germany whereby a candidate who fails the test 3 times must take a medical if they want to try again. If they pass that, they're only allowed 1 more attempt at the test, and if they fail again, they must face a life on the bus. Draconian for sure, but it ought to make the roads safer.
I know, and I've experienced drivers who really should not be allowed behind the wheel of a car. Perhaps on one day they've managed to get their standards up sufficiently to satisfy an examiner. But there are people who are not really capable mentally in many respects and not capable physically of driving a car in today's conditions.
In various African countries, all you have to do to pass a driving test is go backwards 6 feet and forwards 6 feet. Ah ha ha. Well, that's probably about as funny as the Germans find our driving test. Surely it's about time we had a radical overhaul instead of just tinkering around with it. I wonder also if it might be about time we started treating the driving licence as a privilege and not as a right.